Hello and welcome back to Continental Club, where we discuss the hottest topics in European football. It's another quarantine edition, and today I've brought with me Patrick Van Straten and Michael McCubbin for his first Continental appearance for a little while. Welcome aboard, guys. Today we are analysing at SamGG01's question, who says, who would win the Ballon d'Or if it was awarded tomorrow? Massive question. But before we dive into that, just a quick reminder to subscribe to Eurofootball Daily and hit that notification bell to never miss a Continental Club. Obviously, this question might seem a bit redundant at the moment. The season hasn't finished. But with this enforced break, it seems like the perfect point to analyse who have been the standout players of 1920 so far. Obviously, with the Euros being postponed, with Copa America being postponed as well, it's going to come down to a lot of what you do, what you've done for your club and what you do before the end of the season, whenever that is. So it should be quite an interesting discussion. And McCubs, we're going to kick off with one guy from Bayern Munich who has had a phenomenal campaign.
Yeah, I mean, it's no surprise that Robert Lewandowski is in contention for the Ballon d'Or as it stands. I mean, first of all, actually, it's a bit bizarre we're even discussing this because as it is at the moment, we're not really sure what leagues are going to be concluded, what who's going to be winning trophies. Our league's going to be null and void. We've had these conversations a lot, but at the moment it looks like Lewandowski could be one of the candidates who could pick up silverware because it feels like German football probably will conclude at some point, and probably a bit sooner than other leagues in Europe. Obviously, the Champions League looks less and less likely to be finishing, but yeah, I mean, he's just had an incredible season, hasn't he? Even by his standards, 39 goals in 33 games. That's 1.2 goals a game. I think his previous record was 43 goals in 47 games back in 16-17. Looks like if the league does conclude and he's back fully fit, that he'll probably smash that. And just part of a Bayern Munich team as well, which I think has come into form at the right time. After December sort of time, they've really looked like one of the 2 or 3 best in Europe by some distance. So I think in terms of what the Ballon d'Or is measured on, in terms of success, I think Bayern would obviously have to win the Bundesliga, and it is a tough. They're part of a tough title challenge, but at the same time, that probably adds pedigree as well. If they do win the Bundesliga, you can't kind of say, it was just a walk in the park. Like they had, 2 very good sides in Leipzig and Borussia Dortmund, pushing them all the way if they do so. So I think you can probably kind of, that usual kind of discounting of playing in an easier league. I don't think washes this time for sure. And I think, I just don't think the competition necessarily is there. Like when you look at, say, Liverpool, you've got to put in, Mane and Van Dijk for a shout with Liverpool, just because they've been so good. I know Van Dijk was probably receiving more recognition last year than he is this term, but he is still the best centre-back in the world. But I just can't see them getting close to it as well, just because I feel like this Liverpool team, despite probably being the best in the world right now, they've not been powered by any one performance. They've become even more of a team than they were before. And obviously we'll get on to other candidates, but I feel like for me, Lewandowski is the standout, just because he's having by his standards, such a good season. And also he's at that age, like 31, where people might be thinking, you know what, this guy maybe just deserves it. In a similar way to Modric a couple of years ago. Maybe it's just his time to gain that kind of recognition.
Yeah, I think you make a very good point. And also with the Euros being postponed, we know how much standing FIFA give those big tournaments in the summer. And with Poland unlikely to do that well, it actually might work in Lewandowski's favour that competition is postponed if he's going to go for the Ballon d'Or this year. And as you say, just a phenomenal campaign. I think it's only 4 games for Bayern this season that he hasn't scored in. And only 3 of those were in the league. And I think it was Dortmund, Leipzig and Bochum. Other than that, he scored in all his league fixtures. Just quite frightening. And really stepped it up in the Champions League as well. I think he's on 11 goals in the Champions League as well, which is just frightening. And obviously they've still got 7 games to go, potentially if they go all the way to the final. So he could smash Ronaldo's record of, 16? I think it was 16 Champions League goals in a single season, or 17. So what a campaign. Pat, McCubb's briefly touched on some Premier League players there in Mane and Van Dijk, but I think most in the FD office would say that the player of the year so far in the Premier League has been Kevin De Bruyne. Do you think he's got a shout for the Ballon d'Or if it was awarded tomorrow in this hypothetical situation?
I wouldn't expect him to win. I think that Lewandowski has a reasonable claim to being above him, as does Messi, Mbappe, those kind of guys. But what he's done this season is not only remarkable, but pretty rare. So right now, I think he's got 27 goals and assists across 31 League and Champions League games. And this is a guy who, while I think it's slightly over-egged, this idea that he plays in midfield, he's not a real midfielder in the way that other guys are. He is still doing it as clearly a non-forward. His job is not to get on the end of balls into the box, right? And yet he's leading Europe in assists. He's still scoring a decent number of goals. I think he's got 24 goal involvements in the Prem, which puts him one behind that amazing season that Mesut Ozil had in 2015-16 when he got 25 goal involvements. I mean, actually, I was trying to think of midfielders who've had 30 league goal involvements, because while it would be tough, he'd need to get 6 once the league came back. If De Bruyne managed that, I genuinely am not sure who there is who might have done that.
I'm not sure whether Lampard did, maybe in 2009-10. I'm not sure.
I think Lampard did, but the Yaya Toure didn't in 2013-14. He got 29. So there's a very elite club he could put himself into, and he already is in an elite club because only Immobile, Sancho, Messi, and Lewandowski have been involved in more goals than him in league play this season, which is absolutely obscene. I think I counted up, and there are 11 players across Europe's top 5 leagues who've played more than 1,000 minutes in the league and have averaged more than 3 chances created per game. There are 11 of those, and De Bruyne is on 4. Right? So think what a small club it is to be producing 3 chances a game. And he is in an even more elite club than that, alongside Dimi Payet, who mostly does it from set pieces these days, and Christopher Nkunku, who's benefited from getting a lot of sub minutes. So I just think that he's been sensational. Over 3 shots a match, 4 key passes, 1.5 dribbles, 0.83 expected goals and assists. I think the only players with more expected assists per 90 across Europe are Thomas Müller, Mbappe, and Di Maria, which is absolutely nuts. He does a decent amount of pressing as well, a little bit of ball winning, hits some long passes. I think he is genuinely the closest that there is in the modern game to Steven Gerrard. And when it comes to creation, he's much, much better than Steven Gerrard. I mean, he's like a combination of Ozil and Gerrard at their best. It's truly amazing what he's done this season. And I think it's gone a little bit under the radar because City is so far behind Liverpool, and because he hasn't got 20 goals to his name.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I mean, it feels like if City were to go on to win the Champions League, then De Bruyne would come into the reckoning. But hopefully, that really disappointing league campaign from City as a whole doesn't count against him, because he's never really been in the reckoning for a Ballon d'Or so far. I don't think he's even finished in sort of the top 5 or 6. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. But one guy who is very familiar with being at the top of the Ballon d'Or standings and always in the conversation is Leo Messi. And, some people might reply, oh, he's had a bit of a down year. But his numbers have gone from sort of the supernatural to still the exceptional. I think it's 21 goals and 15 assists in 28 League and Champions League games, which is just absolutely frightening, really. His expected goals and assist numbers have dropped to 1.2 per 90 from 1.4. And yes, there's been some issues with Barcelona. They're on course to, they've already matched their most losses in a league season since 2007-8. They've obviously had injuries to Suarez and Dembele, and his on-pitch relationship with Griezmann doesn't seem quite as what it what Barcelona fans would have hoped, and what the Barcelona hierarchy that decided to bring in Griezmann would have hoped. So yeah, there's been some issues, but he has still been absolutely phenomenal. Only Ronaldo and Luis Muriel and Mbappe are taking more than his 5 shots per 90. And only Adama Traore, Neymar and Alain Saint-Maximin are dribbling more than his 5 completed take-ons per 90. So I mean, what more can we say about Messi? Really, there's not much you can really add to this conversation other than he's probably, whenever he's fit, he is the best player in the world. So will always permanently be in this conversation.
Sorry, it's also worth mentioning that he's got these numbers in a season where his teammates have not really been up to scratch. I mean, obviously Suarez has been injured. Griezmann has had, I think, a terrible season. Often his main Ousmane Dembele's obviously been out. Often his main attacking partner has been, a 16-year-old Ansu Fati, and the fact that he's still got 15 assists is absolutely obscene.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he's been involved in 49% of Barcelona's league goals this year. And people are always like, Aubameyang, carries Arsenal. Arsenal are a one-man team. He's been involved in 45% of Arsenal's goals. So the biggest one-man team in world football is arguably Barcelona. And supposedly people say he hasn't been as ruthless in the Champions League as normal. And yes, he's had, I don't think he scored against Dortmund. I don't think he scored against Napoli in the first leg of that tie either. But he's still got 2 goals and 3 assists in 6 Champions League games, which, is still excellent. So Messi for sure will be in the reckoning. Guys, I'm going to throw some worthy mentions at you. And, you can take whatever you want from these and maybe just suggest your one of 2 that stand out from these other shouts, or potential names that could be in the mix as well. So I've got Ciro Immobile, Sadio Mane, Kylian Mbappe, Timo Werner, Ilicic, and Jadon Sancho. McCubs, of that list, who do you think is closest to the Ballon d'Or, and do you think any of them should replace the 3 we've already mentioned?
It's difficult. I mean, obviously, we're talking about it as if it was given now. So I guess like if we're taking out league positions or potential league winners, then I think Timo Werner and Jadon Sancho are both really strong. Like, I know we're talking about Kevin De Bruyne's kind of creative record this season. Jadon Sancho is pretty much at his level in that, and is also contributed so many goals. Timo Werner is kind of having the season of his life as well so far. I think those 2. I think Ciro Immobile, I think would be unfortunate. Is just misses out there. But I think I just think Timo Werner and Jadon Sancho are just more complete players than him.
For sure, I definitely agree with that in terms of more complete players. Do you think, Pat, Lazio are 1 point behind Juventus at the moment, say they manage to, if Serie A resumes, win the title, do you think that puts Ciro Immobile in the mix?
It should do, but I don't know if it will. I just don't think he's like a glamorous enough name for the Ballon d'Or. And fundamentally, I think the Ballon d'Or, they just want the biggest names in football to turn up on the night. But certainly, even if they don't win the title, I think Immobile probably deserves it. I mean, I have no idea why Mane's in that list. I don't really understand why he's there. His numbers are not that great. They're good, but he's not the best forward at Liverpool. So I'm not really sure how that makes sense. But I don't know. To me, Immobile, I think, will be the guy who really gets the shaft here, because he leads Europe in goal involvements. He's doing it in a side which, yes, has some good players, but it's not exactly composed of Galacticos. If they win the title, maybe, but I think he might actually have to settle for being for winning the Golden Boot or something.
Yeah, if they win the title, it might put him in the mix. Okay, guys, it's come down to decision time. Of all the names we've mentioned, who are your personal top 3s? And if you haven't quite decided, I don't mind going first. So for me, I would go Lewandowski, then Messi, then Mbappe, I think, actually. Just having a look, it's 23 goals and 9 assists in 27 League and Champions League games, which is pretty frightening. And then Ciro Immobile, probably the 4th, just because I think it comes down to what McCubbin said. Phenomenal goal-scoring season, but in terms of the best all-round player, I don't think he'd probably make my top 3, even on the basis of this season when he's had such a fantastic scoring record. But that's just my opinion. Pat, what's your top 3?
Messi, Lewandowski, Mbappe. Mbappe would be second if it were not for the fact that he has missed a bunch of minutes.
Fair. McCubbs, are you throwing anyone else in there?
I think the top 2 has to be Messi and Lewandowski. I think, Yeah, I think Messi just edges Lewandowski, I'm afraid. Although I would like to see Lewandowski get it. I think, yeah, Messi, Lewandowski, and then I would go Werner or Sancho. I think I'll go Timo Werner, third place.
Fair. It'd be very exciting to have an Englishman in the top three. It'd be the first time in quite a while, I believe. Anyway, guys, that is our take on who would be the Ballon d'Or winners if it was announced today or tomorrow. So we do have the end of the season, but we thought it was quite a fun discussion. Let's move on to quickfire questions. Our first quickfire question, in the absence of big match preview, we chose @Densing99, who says, what are your favourite European memories from your club? Obviously, there's no big match preview, but we thought we'd get into the spirit of it by recalling our favourite moments. Pat, what was your favourite Arsenal memory of your experiences in Europe?
Obviously beating Barcelona 2-1. That was pretty great. It's got like my favourite Fabregas pass of all time in it. It's absolutely insane. And Lewandowski and Van Persie's goal in that match was ridiculous as well. Jack Wilshere too. But probably you know what? Probably Thierry Henry at the Bernabeu.
Yes.
Because it was just a hilarious individual performance. Have you watched? There was footage going around on Twitter, I think, last week, just of him winding down
the clock.
Winding down the clock at the end. And he just like kind of dribbles along, holds somebody off, and then just breaks into like an unbelievable sprint, gets to the corner flag, like lets somebody kick it out, and then puts his hand up to claim the throw. Like everything about it is so peak.
It's so nonchalant.
But also he seems mad. Like one of the things that I loved about Henry is Henry would want to win a game while making the other team feel bad about themselves. Like he was actually quite unlikable at times, like because of how much he wanted to win. But in that game, I just thought it was really hilarious, and like I don't know, I was very. It's nice that like often I think in football you don't notice how good things are at the time until later on when those good times disappear. But when I was watching Henry as a kid, I remember thinking, the best player in the world plays for my club. That's pretty cool. And it was pretty cool.
Fair. I mean, McCubs, you might have had that same experience when you're watching Ronaldo at United. Are you going to recall a Ronaldo, memory for your favourite European one?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely from that era. I mean, the obvious one would obviously be winning it in 2008. That was like a ridiculous. That was a ridiculous evening in terms of my emotions. So that was that obviously sticks out. But yeah, I think aside from that, because that's not that interesting to talk about. I think that and we've actually discussed it on Twitter, Dukes. That 7-1 win over Roma in 2007.
Oh yeah, I love this one.
Was just I think that does stick out, and I watched the highlights of it recently, and I forget that every goal in that game was good. Like when you get those games where I think it actually reminded me a little bit. The goals weren't quite as good or individually brilliant as the Bayern Munich Spurs game, which was also, that was 7-2, wasn't it? Not quite as good because Gnabry was just on a tear that night, and both the Lewandowski goals were unbelievable as well. But that United performance, every goal was pretty top draw, and even the Roma goal, even the Daniel De Rossi goal was like almost impossible. It was like he like flicked it into the bottom corner on the volley. With his head turned. It was just absolutely outrageous, and I think the context of it as well was really important. Like I remember United lost the first leg 2-1 in Rome. It was an evening when infamously a lot of United fans, there was a lot of like crowd trouble, and the local police came down particularly hard on the United fans. I remember there was a lot of like baton bashing and stuff, and people kind of getting thrown to the ground. And I think it was also, I forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think it might have been one of those evenings when a couple of travelling fans got stabbed by Roma supporters as well. So there was quite a, and United lost. I don't know if I'd said that already. So like, there was a bit of a kind of bad feeling going into the second leg, and then Carrick scores a brilliant long range effort. Kind of looped effort almost to kick things off, and then that was putting through United on away goals, and I remember that being a little bit of a relief. And then suddenly the floodgates just opened, and all this kind of bad feeling from the first leg was suddenly just replaced by this absolute rout. And yeah, the whole team just having a great time. Alan Smith had only recently come back from injury after that leg break against Liverpool in 2006. He'd been out for a whole year, and he finished off like one of the best team goals probably of the whole Ferguson era, to be honest. I think it was like 7 or 8 players, literally one touch from one end to the other. Ronaldo was in great form. Ryan Giggs at 34, I think, got like 4 assists all game. Rooney was his usual self as well. I think it was just one of those nights where probably the best team, I think, of Ferguson's era at United were just all on song. I can't really think of another performance that quite matches that. And after that game, it just really felt like we were going to go and win it. AC Milan beat us in the next round, but I remember weirdly, like, Owen Hargreaves. I think Milan had beaten Bayern Munich in the quarterfinals, and it was a few months before we bought Owen Hargreaves. But I feel like his heart was already set on moving to Manchester. And I remember seeing, I think it might have been the following night when AC Milan beat Bayern, but Owen Hargreaves in the afterwards in the press conference just saying that Milan were going to get absolutely torn apart by Man United, and yeah, it didn't turn out to be true, but yeah, it was a nice memory anyway.
Yeah, that was I enjoyed our chat about that on Twitter the other day. That's weirdly one of my favourite memories from English clubs in Europe. Obviously, I haven't seen Sunderland in Europe in my lifetime, so I just leech off every other club, which is, I think, why I get so excited when English clubs do well in the Champions League, because realistically I know Sunderland aren't going to be there anytime soon. One of my favourite memories, not for any great performance, but just for the sheer sort of the fact that I just couldn't believe it had happened, was when Chelsea with Ramirez beat Barcelona at the Nou Camp. And there was it just seemed so improbable. I think they were down to 10 men. Messi hit the post on a penalty. It must have been about 35 shots against them, and somehow they went through. That was an extraordinary night. And then, more recently, some of the streams we've actually been lucky to do on Total Football as well have been absolutely ridiculous. So Spurs' comeback against Ajax, Spurs in that game against Man City at the Etihad where it was 4-3, and then Pep thought they'd equalise. And then, it was disallowed in the last minute. That was absolutely mental. So a lot of good experiences in the Champions League. We'll move on to Ashley Toomey 9's question, just to wrap up, who says, your players of the season for the teams you support so far. I think I can guess Pat's one. So, McCubbs, who's Man United's player of the season for you?
Oh, it's a tough one. It's for me, it's between Aaron Wan-Bissaka and Fred, I think. It's being a little bit harsh on Marcus Rashford because he has had the season of his life, but unfortunately, because of that injury, he just hasn't. He hasn't been a part of the last 2 months and the last, up until the postponement of the season. Those final 6 weeks were pretty good for the side. I'm going to go for Fred. I think Aaron Wan-Bissaka's easily been one of the best signings we've made in recent years. Has really sorted that defence, and I think had probably a little bit more influence than Harry Maguire on it. But I think just the way that Fred's turned around his form, has kind of plugged a gap which we really needed to be plugged in that defensive midfield slot. And he's become the player that I think people were hoping him to be when we originally signed him from Shakhtar. And it's just been really nice to see a guy who was kind of becoming almost a bit of a meme, become a real fan favourite. And even in games where United have lost, he's still stood out, which I think is that's a good sign of how consistent the player is. He's not just he's not just playing well in games where the team as a whole is playing well. He's actually digging us out of quite sticky situations. At least the Liverpool game springs to mind particularly. We were getting completely outplayed, and yet he was still holding his own in the midfield. I think Fred has to be it for me.
Yeah, Fred's a great shout. I mean, what a story, what a turnaround. As you say, he was getting lambasted on social media every week. Pat, who's your Arsenal player of the season?
The obvious answer is Aubameyang. he has been great, but I also think Bernd Leno probably deserves a bit of a shout. I think the first half of the season, when we were absolutely rank and we were just conceding shots from every angle constantly to any team, no matter who they were playing, Leno really kept us in some matches. And actually, I've had to eat my words about him, because he came from Germany with a reputation, and to be honest, I'd seen it myself, like for making a lot of silly errors. You know, like he'd produce an amazing save, but then he would make a silly error, and he has still done some of those. But generally speaking, he's been excellent pretty much all the time, and his ability with his feet really helps us pass out of the back. I also think after that, you've got to give Bukayo Saka credit. He's played on the wing, he's played at left wing back, he's played at left back, and he's done a pretty good job wherever he's been, and he is 18 years old. So yeah, it's a pretty bad show for the senior players that my players of the season probably go Aubameyang, Leno, and then Saka and Martinelli.
Yeah, tells you everything you need to know about Arsenal. I think Saka's a very good shout, deserves, to be in that reckoning at least. Sunderland's player of the year, no one probably cares, is Lyndon Gooch. It's got to be the Gooch man. It was an absolute honour to watch him score away at MK to secure that crucial win around January time. But guys, enough about Lyndon Gooch. That's all we've got time for on Continental Club for this week. Thank you so much for tuning in. Let us know what you guys thought of our comments in the comments section below. Pat, what should they go and do now?
You should obviously check out this week's podcast. It's a bit of a special one. Basically, Chris, Zach, and I decided to draft teams of the best Premier League players of the 2010s. So it's not teams of the decade. It's the best players to play in the Premier League during the last decade. So longevity, not so much of a factor, which is why I picked Luis Suarez with my first pick. It's pretty good. You can actually vote on which team you think is the best. And a little hint, it's not Chris's team. It's terrible.
Love it. McCubs, anything from you? What would you like to push?
Everything You Need to Know came out on Wednesday. That was on Alex Ferguson and his influence on the English game. So yeah, go and show that some love. And I can't really think of anything else. I think that's it. Yeah,
it was an excellent script. So go and enjoy. I think it's been a good series, or a good start to a series so far. So go and check those videos out. Thank you very much for watching, guys. We'll see you later. Bye.